Right, so welcome back. My name's William Young, and this is the second in a series of videos about energy and some thoughts I've had about how significant and important it is for us. So the first thing to understand is that energy can be expanding or contracting or held in balance. They're the three main concepts of what all energy is in the universe. If it's contracted, we sort of see it in the form of a solid, and ultimately, I suppose, in the form of a black hole in hugely dense contracted energy. And then as a solid changes, the energy starts to be expanded. It goes from being a solid to a liquid to a gas, and ultimately plasma or space, in effect, is the ultimate form of expanded energy. So we see that on the electromagnetic spectrum. If you look at it, it's a spectrum that describes the frequency or vibration of energy, and it basically is all energy. All energy is a form of light energy or a form of wave or frequency. And the interesting thing is that we as humans have an affinity for energy. We are energy, we're made up of energy, and as a consequence we sort of feel what that energy is. It's imperceptible, and most of us don't think about it on a day-to-day basis, but all the time we're absorbing and taking in information and sort of making sense of it. Because these energy is in a wave, it's analogous to a sort of form of a snake. And throughout all cultures, there's been references to snakes, the Egyptians with the asps, the Aboriginals with their rainbow serpents, the Bible, of course, with the story, the Genesis story. And my understanding is that sort of equivalence of using the snake is because we understand the electromagnetic spectrum, which is in the form of a wave that looks fairly like a snake. And it's not just the fact it looks like a snake, it's sort of we feel it and respond to it and try and sort of verbalize or visualize it in the form of a snake. And the two ends of the electromagnetic spectrum are, on the one side, the sort of contracted energy, which forms, I think it's X-ray waves and buildings and our own body's contracted energy, and then on the other side, gamma rays and hugely expanded energy. We use the form of a snake to try and conceptualize what energy is. And on the one side, this contracted, densely packed, I suppose, energy you'd call it, is the sort of pulling energy, which is our desire. It's our pulling energy. It's the energy that we have within us that wants to pull things in towards us. And the opposite side is that energy where we're pushing away. It's the fear energy of wanting to be away from things or having things pushed away from us. So in a sort of a spiritual, I suppose you'd call it, realm, contracted energy is our own, in ourselves, desire, and expanded energy is fear. And when we're able to balance these two energies, we feel at peace. I mean, balanced energy is literally energy at rest. It's neither expanding nor contracting. And Einstein's theories of relativity talked about when we accelerate with speed, our length contracts. And this contraction is just relative to something else. So at all points we are relatively expanded or contracted relative to something else. So in essence, everything, unless it's in balance, is either expanded or contracted energy relative to some other energy in the universe. So that's why I'm saying all energy is relatively expanded or contracted, because it literally is. Now, the interesting thing is in the Bible, obviously it talks about, in the beginning, God created the universe. And in the beginning, there was just energy, and that energy was neither expanded nor contracted. And then God said, "Let there be light." Now, let there be light literally means the first time that energy was held in balance, i.e. contracting and expansion actually started, and energy was held in balance, and that created light. Now, why am I saying that? Well, if you think back to your old sort of school days of doing scientific experiments, when we used to create light in an electric circuit, we used to have a cell and place it on a circuit board, and then the energy released from the cell would travel around the circuit in the form of electricity. It would hit a resistor, and it's that resistance, the sort of, I suppose, compressing force of halting the current, that creates the friction that heats the element, that then creates this heat in the element that ultimately releases light. And so it's sort of the contracting force of the resistor combined with the release of heat energy that creates visible light. I mean, and a similar sort of thing happens when we strike a match. So we press down on the match, and that creates a contracting force. The friction creates an expanding force in the form of heat, and that creates visible light. Again, the same sort of principle happens in the sun over a longer period, where the contracting force of nuclear fusion creates an incredible, ultimately, release of heat that eventually creates visible light. So as you can see, visible light is really created by the physical holding in balance of expanding and contracting forces. Now that's some form of, I suppose, physical holding in strength of expanding and contracting forces. Now that's as I said, the physical way the visible light is created. But there's another way to create a sort of a spiritual light, and it's the light that's talked about in the Bible, and which Jesus talks about when he says, "I am the light of the earth." And that's where, instead of holding physically these expanding, contracting forces, it's almost like you step aside or step in front and let those expanding and contracting forces hold each other with no physical intervention from you. And when we do this, or when we find the way to do it through Jesus or through other means, we create this sort of ethereal balance, a spiritual balance that enables light energy, true light energy or spiritual light energy to result.